If you haven't heard part 1 and part 2, please do so before proceeding. For those of you that have been waiting, I apologize. The last couple of days have been a little crazy to say the least. Listen on and you'll see what I mean. When my wife woke up, we had a long discussion on what our next step should be. While we were talking, I casually glanced at her wrist and noticed the burn mark was still there. She saw me looking, and her usual radiant green eyes became dull.
It is me. I wish I could tell you not to be afraid of me. But I don't trust myself anymore.
Tears started running down her face as I gave her a hug and comforted her, without responding. She was right. I was starting to doubt of the person I trusted to protect me in any situation. Though I took some solace in the fact that she was still the one who saved me twice from the twisted entity. Besides doubting ourselves, we did come up with a few theories that seemed to make sense in light of recent events. First, it seems that the entity is unable to appear in my wife's presence, proven by the fact that the moment she passed out, I was able to see it. Second, the entity is either evolving since it was able to speak and move out of the house, or there might be multiple entities as some of you suggested. Third, technology could potentially be a weakness for this thing, as the phone call has saved me twice now. Finally, there's something very wrong with that house that the entity just doesn't want us to be there. The house is something that has to be explored, but it's too dangerous just to go back without any further knowledge. So we decided to talk to the only person in Natalie's life who had experienced the overlap, her high school friend Chris. After making some phone calls, we found out that Chris lived in a nearby town and had become a support group speaker for the visually impaired. It turned out that he was actually speaking at 11 a.m., and we still had enough time to be able to make it. We got on the small community hall just in time as they closed the doors. Most of Chris's speech was very uplifting and full of emotion, talking about all that he had achieved in life. He ended his speech by saying, "The day that I lost my vision was the day that I truly stopped living in fear." We stuck around after, and when the hall had emptied, approached Chris, who was standing next to his wife, whom he had introduced earlier during the speech. I didn't know how to even begin to ask him about his vision loss, but before I could say anything, he pointed to me. "Ah, so the overlap happened. She said you would come." He then went on to tell us that ever since the incident, Natalie's great-grandmother had been in close touch with Chris. She felt very guilty about what happened, and was determined to find out as much as she could. She also insisted that it was only a matter of time before the overlap happened again around Natalie, and she wanted to find a way to stop it. When we told Chris about the condition of the house and about the symbols that I saw, he became very serious. Then she tried to do it. She tried to bind what holds the sisters together to her house. "I'm afraid she may have not survived that," he said quietly. I was really confused at this point. "Did you just say sisters?" I asked. Chris then told us to follow him home, as there was a lot we needed to discuss. While Chris's wife cooked us lunch, he told us about the day he lost his vision. "So I've never told anyone except your great-grandmother, but the day that I lost my vision, before I passed out, I'm pretty certain I saw a second entity behind the one that I was staring at in disbelief. And as I drifted into unconsciousness, I heard a whisper, 'Feed.'" He went on to explain that Natalie's great-grandmother called the entities sisters, since she was certain there was more than one of them. Additionally, she believed that they feed off of our fears, and not just fear, but the greater the fear, the more attracted the entity becomes. This made sense, seeing as I've been afraid most of my life, and now I'm at the peak of my fear since the one that I saw as my protector has become the subject of my fear. After years of research into ancient lore, demonology, mythology, and family history, Natalie's great-grandmother found a way to pin the sisters. That has to be why there were strange symbols in the house and why the sisters didn't want us going near it. She must have found a way to bind them there. However, seeing as this entity still appeared and drove with me in the car, that means they're still able to move freely, but they might have a vulnerability in that house. All of this was progress, yet the thought of not knowing how to deal with these sisters was quite troubling.
"Lunch is ready,"
called out Chris's wife as we made our way to the kitchen to enjoy a much-needed meal. Chris wanted to end this as much as we did, so he insisted that we spend the night with him for our safety. Seeing as I'd not gotten much sleep lately, I welcomed the idea. We all stayed in the living room, and Chris's wife and I took shifts staying up to make sure nothing happened. I woke up at 3 a.m., feeling thirsty yet again. I laughed at myself as I thought maybe I have a medical condition of waking up thirsty in the middle of the night. I looked over at Chris's wife since it was her shift to be on watch. Sure enough, she was awake and looking over me with a gentle smile. I whispered, "Water?" as she pointed to the kitchen. I walked over, half in fear of seeing the entity again. The kitchen was thankfully empty, as I went to look for water in the fridge. Darn, no cold water in the fridge. I figured they might have some bottled water in the pantry. When I opened the pantry, I saw that it was very spacious and dark. I went to turn on the light and saw something very unexpected and horrific. In the corner lay Chris's wife, tied up, seemingly unconscious. Then it all hit me. Lunch is ready. Those were the only words spoken by Chris's wife that day. I was so caught up in figuring out what was chasing us that I missed the fact completely. I rushed back to the living room to find my wife missing and Chris sound asleep. What ensued after is beyond bizarre. I woke up Chris and called the cops immediately. I knew they must have taken her to the house. I didn't have time to tell them my wife was missing, so I rushed out the door and headed for the house. Yeah, I know that was really stupid, but we do stupid things when our loved ones are in danger. It's just human nature. During the drive, I kept asking myself, how did I miss that? Why was the entity evolving so fast? It took another form? Was it because I wasn't supposed to survive an overlap? Much less twice? Is it hunting me down? But why take my wife? I'm the one they want. I finally reached the house. It was now 6 in the morning. Before I could step outside my car, the phone rang. It was Natalie. Hello? Honey? Are you okay? Where are you? I yelled as I picked up.
I'm so confused. I thought we slept at Chris's house. I'm home. Please just come back.
Now I was really confused. Is that still my wife on the phone? Honey, your wrist. Before I could finish, she replied,
Yes, there is a burn mark on my wrist.
So I decided to drive back. As I started reversing, I saw it. Standing in the window of that decrepit house, sipping water from a glass, smiling at me. With eyes shining greener than usual. I left for home frustrated and not understanding any of what was going on. On my drive back, I wondered. It knew I was going to go back to the house to look for my wife. It wanted me to see. But why? When I got home, Natalie came running out to give me a hug. I felt cold-hearted for doing this, but I immediately pulled out her wrist to find the burn mark on it. She looked up at me in disappointment.
It is me.
As I finally looked into her eyes, my heart stopped. Her eyes. They were a dark black. The iris of her eye was no longer the beautiful green that I had come to find comfort in. They were a deep black. Natalie has been crying a lot ever since she looked in the mirror, and I'm still processing all of what just happened. It's been a complete day since her eyes changed color. There have been no more sightings of the entity. Life is seemingly normal. Not perfect anymore, but normal. Natalie is still herself, but seems to be a lot more of a serious person now. I spoke with Chris on the phone, and he told me that him and his wife were doing okay, and haven't seen the entity since. At this point, I'm recording this update, and I'm not sure if I should go back to the house and investigate. I can't help but think it wanted me to see its eyes that day back at the house. It wanted me to know what it took from me. I don't even know if destroying the sisters will bring back Natalie's beautiful green eyes. With that said, I'm keeping a close eye on her.